And let's say a few things as to why it's such a big day, what makes today so auspicious. But like mainly what I want to do is I want to study a Bagalā Tantra with you. I've been meaning to do this for a while. Actually, last week I wanted to look at the Matangi Tantra in anticipation of Mahāvidyās Jayanti that just passed. So I thought it would be nice to look at the Tantra and to look at what it is to practice, what it is to worship Matangi in order to prepare for the Matangi Jayanti, which fell on Akshaya Tritiya. But because we were very busy in Atlanta with the retreat, we didn't really get a chance to talk about the Matangi Tantra. So the day after we had gotten home from Atlanta, we said a few things about Matangi earlier this week, Wednesday. But now coming up is Bagalā Jayanti. So on Sunday, we're going to be celebrating Ma Bagalāmukhī, one of the more mysterious forms of Ma and one that's especially important for our lineage, given Sarada Devi manifesting that rupa, that form of Ma. So I want to talk about Bagala's Tantra today, and I want to actually look at the primary source with you, which I think is a very exciting thing to do, given that this is our puja class, and every Thursday evening at 6:30 p.m. for the past like 3 years now, we've been meeting together and discussing puja, and we've finished with all the preliminaries. We finished studying Bhuta Shuddhi and the Nyasas, and now we're finally starting to worship gods and goddesses. So this is an exciting part of the class, and it allows us to look at padathis, meaning ritual manuals devoted to different aspects of the one divinity, Brahman, Shiva. So today we'll think about Bagala and we'll talk about Bagala's Tantra, but also I'll help you acquaint yourself to the genre of Tantra, to see a primary source and to see the way it's structured. It's an exciting thing to study Tantra. It's even more exciting to have a Tantra in your hands with all of the mantras and the yantras and the dhyanas and the puja vidhi, to like actually be able to see that firsthand is really exciting, really thrilling. That's what we're going to do today. So Sumeru and I, like Sumeru Ji is visiting, he's here, and we've been like mad. We've been like just all night, all morning. We discovered something really exciting. So I'm very excited to share with you our new process. But first, let me say a few things about why this day is so auspicious. Oh my God, Colleen. Oh my God, absolutely. You are by no means a beginner, and you are obviously more than welcome to please sit and enjoy. It's gonna be fun. I think it's going to be a very thrilling discussion about tantric primary sources and a kind of inquiry into a goddess who is revered but not known about very much, or for whom the worship and the practice is shrouded in a lot of mystery and superstition. So I'll say a bit as to why this particular form of Ma is particularly important for our lineage. But first, look at Viranatha. He's in Iowa now, but he's got a screen. Oh my God, that's a cool view actually. We're just like watching the horizon go by. Oh my God, Jai Ma. Viranatha is still on the way home from Atlanta actually. Jai Ma. It's a journey of 1,000 steps. It begins with a single bus ticket, I suppose. Anyway, so nice to be in Atlanta together. And next up, we're going to be in Colorado. We'll be in Kuleshwari's living room and we'll have like a Colorado, Nevada gathering. Also, Jessica, hello, Jaimo, Jaimo. So good to see you, Ma. So, first, before we get into the Bagalāmukhī Tantra, I want to review the Matangi Tantra a little bit also. Before we get into any of that, let me just say why today is such a sacred and important day. Today, 1st of May, is the anniversary, the Gregorian calendar anniversary of the founding of the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission in 1897 by Swami Vivekananda at Balaram Bose's house. So today is a day of establishing things. Akshaya Tritiya just went by, and that's a great day for starting new things. So today the mission was established, and it's by the grace of the Avatara we maintain that we get to do things like this. So we argue that like at a certain point, the Upanishadic knowledge was very, very exclusive to only a small group of people who, first of all, had Sanskrit literacy, but second of all, were born in a particular class of society, and third of all, were fortunate enough to be able to access those life-giving scriptures known as the Upanishads. In those teachings, you get universal ideas about spirituality. You learn about the essential nature of the soul being beyond body and mind, being the one non-dual essence in which the entire world manifests. This profound life-giving teaching was locked up in the Upanishads for a very long time. It trickles through in the form of Ramayana, Mahabharata, Puranas. So even then, even if you don't access the Upanishads, you still access that wisdom, but never direct, never so profoundly as if you were holding an Upanishad. So what Swami Vivekananda did uniquely is to make that which was known to a few known to many, to take what was there only in the forest and in the mountain caves and to bring it into the cities so that it could be the common property of every man, woman, person, and child. Because it was the heritage of every human being. If there's something good somewhere, if there's something spiritually nourishing, if there's some universal spiritual teaching, it should be made accessible and available to one and all. So anyone who's sincere anywhere should have any and all tools to make progress in spiritual life. So that was Swami Vivekananda's mission, to democratize spirituality, if you will, to spread the wealth of spiritual teachings. So he came to America and he taught to one and all teachings that were only given to the very few. So that's an exciting thing. The Upanishads, they were kept behind these gates, and he kicked down the gates and he let loose the flood tide. He said, "Sinners, it is a sin to call you sinners. It's a standing libel on human nature. The Hindu refuses to call you a sinner. We call you children of immortal bliss," which is a line from the Upanishads. So that life-giving teaching that you are innately divine, ever free, ever pure, even here, even now, that teaching needed to be offered to one and to all. It's such a life-giving, such a profound teaching. So that being said, the mission that Swami Vivekananda had when he came to the West was not to convert people into any religion. Somebody asked him in an interview, "Do you mean to convert people into Hinduism?" He said, God forbid the Christian become a Hindu, or the Hindu become a Muslim, or the Muslim become a Buddhist. He said, "I'm here to teach Christians to be better Christians." In other words, he's interested in teaching universal principles of spirituality that can be applied in any spiritual context whatsoever. And that was Swamiji's mission. But the reason Swamiji was being driven to do this was because he is the foremost disciple of Paramahansa Sri Ramakrishna, who in our tradition we hold to be an avatara, which means he's a special manifestation of God's grace, whose effect is to make public that which is known to a few. Democratization. It's like the springtime of spirituality, if you will. So what otherwise would be really, really, really hard to access at any other given time and setting is now made easier of access to one and to all. So anybody who's sincere in any capacity will be blessed, as it were, in the springtime of spirituality, because they have access like never before. We have access to the Gita, to the Upanishads, to the Puranas, to all the world's spiritual traditions, to Sufi traditions, to Tibetan Buddhist traditions. Like perhaps for the first time in history, all the greatest ideas developed by cultures all over the world are being brought together and brought to your doorstep. Literally, like Amazon will deliver the Upanishads to you, regardless of the ethics of the company. Like I think it's important to remember that there are tools and processes and industries today that make knowledge more easily accessible than ever before. There's so many translations of ancient texts, and it's a remarkable time to be alive. And we often argue that it's the grace of God, the avatara, the grace of the avatar is to make that which is known to a few, known to all. So I think this day is particularly important because it marks the occasion of the founding of an institution which would, over the course of the next 100 or so years, profoundly change the world in terms of what was accessible and what was available. Mhm. So today, May 1st, 1897, at Balaram Bose's house, the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission was established, and we see what we do here as an extension of that. So what we're doing, we all of us together gathering to learn the tantras, we're like an emanation of that moment at Balaram Bose's house, that afternoon, a Sunday afternoon, 1st of May. We are standing here now as a reverberation, as an echo of that momentous moment in history when Swamiji established the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission. So to just celebrate that for a moment, because it's that is enabling what we're going to do today. Because today we're going to look at a tantra that for so long has been known to only a few, which is now being made publicly available to one and to all. Those who are sincere in approaching Ma Bagala now are empowered to do so in a way that they never before in history could. And that's being made possible with the tools that I want to talk about in today's class. So I think it's directly the effect of the avatara. Once I was giving a retreat in San Diego, and actually, I was with an Advaita Vedanta teacher who was very, very, he's a monk of the order and very, very famous, very well regarded Advaita Vedanta teacher. And we were both in the courtyard outside the monastery talking about the retreat and talking about the avatara. Like, what exactly is the incarnation? What is the doctrine of the avatara? And we're talking about how mainly it's to make that which is not accessible to one and to all, etc. And then this Swami, a very great man, like waved his hand, indicating all the people that had gathered in the courtyard. And they were a very diverse group of people. Like there were all sorts of people, all ages, all walks of life, all traditions. Like they were all gathered there in the courtyard. And he said, this is the effect of the avatara. And then he went on to elaborate this Upanishadic wisdom, these Advaitic thoughts, these ideas were hitherto unknown to the world. And now look, in this courtyard, there are people from all walks of life gathered to study that which was so, only a few years ago, so esoteric, so unknown prior to the advent of like Ramana Maharshi or Nisargadatta Maharaj. And way back before that, Swami Vivekananda, before any of that, this stuff was not known, and now it is. So with that in mind, What we're going to do today is to make accessible that which is known to only a few, and that's directly the grace of the Avatara, who we're celebrating today, since today is the founding day of the Ramakrishna Math mission. So before we pick up the Bagalāmukhī Tantra and the Matangi Tantra, allow me to just read to you a little bit from the life of Swami Vivekananda by his Eastern and Western disciples. In volume 2, there's an account of this day, of the founding of the Ramakrishna Mutt and mission. So just for fun, I mean, we tend to do this every year, but let me just read to you a little bit from that um, report. So here it's page 244 of the life of Swami Vivekananda in the chapter called Back to Bengal. So you have to recall Swami Vivekananda has finished his triumphant dance across America and across Europe. So he just visited Switzerland and he was there in Germany. And of course, he spent a lot of time in London in 1896. And that's where we get some of his best lectures on Jnana Yoga. In October of 1896, he gave a series of fiery talks on the very highest Upanishadic wisdom. And this is after he was in America for a little while, 1893 in Chicago and Boston, and then 1895 in New York, like that. So it's whirlwind tour in America, which is responsible for, in my opinion, every single yoga studio in America today. Every bit of Eastern philosophy that anybody anywhere has accessed in America, I can trace directly back to Swamiji's Herculean efforts at bringing Eastern spirituality into America at that time, way before the 60s, you know. So there he was in America, 1893-ish to 1895, and then he goes to the UK, and he's there till like 97. He comes back to Sri Lanka, makes another effort to tour India and give lectures all over the place, particularly in South India, in Madras. Fiery lectures, words of fire, teaching the harmony of all religions, the innate divinity of the soul, the oneness of all existence, like that. And so he eventually gets back to Kolkata. And so this is in the chapter called Back to Bengal. And so I'll read to you now from page 244. Another initiation ceremony took place at Alambazar Mutt in the first week of May, when the Swami gave mantras to Sharat Chandra Chakravarti and Sudhir. The latter, who had joined the monastery in April that year, was now named Brahmachari Shuddhananda by the Swami. So these are the first few people, arguably, that are being initiated into monastic life in the Mutt and mission. The Swami's talks on renunciation had so inspired him that he could no more stay at home, and leaving his college studies, he had joined the monastery. To Sharat, the Swami said, "Arouse Shraddha in yourself and in your fellow countrymen. Like Nachiketa, go to Yama's door if necessary to know the truth." It's a reference to the Katha Upanishad. Go to death's door. Go into the gates of hell if necessary to get hold of the truth. If there is strength anywhere, try to get a hold of it, even if it means you have to go into the depths of hell. That was one of Swamiji's teachings. Um, for the salvation of your soul, for the solution of the mystery of life and death. If going into the jaws of death helps you to gain the truth, you have to do that fearlessly. All fear is death. You have to go beyond it. Be fearless. Be ready from today to lay down your life to attain moksha, liberation, and for the good of others. This is the motto of the Ramakrishna Mutt and mission. Atma, to attain mokshartham, to attain liberation of the soul, and jagatitayacha, for the welfare of all. Otherwise, what is the use of bearing this burden of flesh and bones, being initiated into the fiery mantra of absolute renunciation for the sake of the Lord? Give away yourself for the good of the world, as the sage Dadichi did when the Devas came and told him that the demon Vritra could not be killed with any other weapons but a thunderbolt made of his bones. Of these happy days, Shuddhananda said later, it was the end of April 1897. Only 5 days ago, I had left home to live with the sannyasis of the Alambazar Mutt. Swamis Premananda, Nirmalananda, and Shubodhananda were then living there. Swamiji presently came back after his visit to Darjeeling. He had gone there for his health. He was just lecturing way too much and his health was breaking down, so his disciples forced him to go to the cooler climb of Darjeeling to like rest. Even there, he was working really hard, keeping up a heavy correspondence and whatnot. Um, Along with him, there were the Swamis Brahmananda, Yogananda, and the Madrasi disciples Alasinga, Kiri, Gigi, and others. Swami Nityananda, only a few days before, took sannyas from Swamiji. He spoke to Swamiji one day about the need for a systematic training for the Matta, as a large number of young people had at that time joined the Matt to lead a life of renunciation. Swamiji readily agreed to the suggestion and asked him to gather all the inmates who all assembled in the hall. Let someone be writing as I dictate, said Swamiji. So this is the beginnings of establishing some kind of institution. This is just first for the monastics. So he says, no one seemed to be prepared to come forward, and finally the task fell on me. This is Swami Shuddhananda. It might be said in passing that at that time, with the inmates of the mutt, literary education was out of favor, the prevailing notion being that to realize God by sadhana and bhajana was the goal, while literary knowledge, even though it might bring a little fame and name, was really useless for a sadhaka, spiritual aspirant. Only in the case of those who are chosen by God to carry his mission or message was there need for literary training. Swamiji, before dictating the rules, remarked as follows. Look here, we are going to make rules, no doubt. But we must remember the main object, therefore. Our main object is to transcend all rules and regulations. We have naturally some bad tendencies, which are to be changed by observing good rules and regulations. And finally, we have to go beyond all these, even, just as we remove one thorn by another and throw both of them away. The course of discipline and routine decided upon was of this kind. So it's really remarkable disclaimer. It's like I'm gonna tell you what to do, but eventually you can't take it too seriously. Spiritual life is about freedom, so you can't be bound to rules either. And then he goes and says, both morning and evening should be devoted to meditation, while the afternoons, after a short rest, should be utilized for individual studies, and in the evenings, one particular religious book should be read and expounded. It was also provided that each member would take physical exercise both morning and evening. Another rule was to the effect that no intoxicant save tobacco should be allowed. Having dictated the rules, Swamiji asked me to make a fair copy of the rules and instructed me that I should put all the rules in the positive form. That is to say, there's no do nots. It's like do this, do that, like that. So kind of positive psychology spin. Anyway, the rules and regulations have, with little alteration, taken permanent form as the rules and regulations of the Ramakrishna Mutt, Belur. Sometime in the first week of May, the Swami paid a visit to Mahakali Pattashala of the Tapaswini Matta at Chorabagan. At the end of his visit, he wrote in the institution's visitors book, have great pleasure in witnessing to the good work inaugurated in our city by Mataji. The move appears to me to be in the right direction and deserves the support of all who desire to see their daughters educated on national lines. Sharat Chandra was with the Swami that day. On their way back to Bhag Bazaar, the latter spoke about women's education as follows: religion, arts, science, housekeeping, cooking, sewing, hygiene. The simple essential points in these subjects ought to be taught to our women. It is not good to let them stagnate. The Mahakali Patashala is to a great extent moving in the right direction, but only teaching rites of worship won't do. Their education must be an eye opener in all matters. Ideal characters must always be presented before the girls to imbue them with the devotion to lofty principles. The noble examples of Sita, Savitri, Damayanti, Leelavati, Khana, and Meera should be inspired to mold their own lives in light of these. So Swamiji was a huge advocate of women's education, which at that time in India, because of 700 years of Mongol rule and because of colonial, because of the Raj, like it was really in shambles. And Swamiji, as you know, a trigger warning, but his sister committed suicide, and after that he became very, very serious about the plight of women in India. So Swamiji did something very unique when he founded the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission. It was very important to him that the convent be founded as a separate organization that is not under the umbrella of the monastery, because like in other monastic traditions, usually the men of the monastery will come to dominate the convent, and so the convent becomes like a branch of the monastery, and Swamiji felt like the rule of men was not fitting for a place of women. So he insisted upon the Sarada Math, the convent of the Ramakrishna Mission, be its own administration. It's a wholly separate institution. It's a wholly separate organization from the Ramakrishna Mutt and Mission. That was one thing that he was doing, looking forward. Somebody asked him about a political issue at that time involving women, and he said, "Why are you asking me? Go ask the women what they say. You do that." He was very ahead of his time in things like this, and he was very serious about educating young women in order that they may like also be involved in the economy. So that's one thing. So you can see his work with the monastics, establishing the monastic order, and here you can already see the intimation of the idea of like a Sarada convent and his work with women in India. Whenever the Swami came to Kolkata, now we come to it. So this is the moment when the Matta is itself established. Whenever the Swami came to Kolkata, he stayed for a short time at Balaram Babu's house in Bagh Bazaar, where he and the monastic members of the order were always met with warm hospitality. On such occasions, devotees and visitors from all parts of the city gathered there. We have already noted the Swami's intention to start an organization for service on all levels, from the spiritual to the material, service in which monks, devotees, and general public would cooperate. Accordingly, on his return from Darjeeling, he called a meeting of all the monastic and lay disciples of Sri Ramakrishna. It took place at 3 p.m. on Saturday. Sorry, I said Sunday. It's actually Saturday, May 1st, 1897, at Balaram Babu's house. When all had assembled, the Swami opened the meeting with the following words in Bengali. The reason I read that other stuff is I just want you to know the context in which all of this is happening, the intimations of ideas that would be so important for the Mutt and mission. So here's what Swamiji says. From my travels in various countries, I have come to the conclusion that without organization, nothing great and permanent can be done. But in a country like India, at our present stage of development, it does not seem to me well advised to start an organization on a democratic basis in which every member has an equal voice and decisions are arrived at by a majority of the votes of the community. With the West, the case is different. Among us also, when with the spread of education we learn to sacrifice, to stand above our individual interests and concerns for the good of the community or the nation at large, then it will be possible to work on a democratic basis. Taking this into consideration, we should have for our organization at present a director whose orders everyone should obey. Then, in the fullness of time, it will be guided by the opinion and the consent of the members. This association will bear the name of him in whose name we have become sannyasis. Him, taking whom as your ideal you are leading the householder life in the field of activity, this samsara, this world. Him, whose holy name and the influence of whose unique life and teachings have within 12 years of his demise spread in such an unthought of way both in the East and in the West. Let this Sangha organization therefore be named the Ramakrishna Mission. We are but the servants of the Master. May you all help in this work. The proposal was enthusiastically supported by all the householder disciples. There was discussion about the future method of work. In this meeting on May 1st, the Ramakrishna Mission Association was established, and at a second meeting on May 5th, resolutions were passed laying down the main principles by which the movement was to be guided, and its aims and objects. As originally drawn up, these were as follows. This association, Sangha, shall be known as the Ramakrishna Mission. The aim of the Sangha is to preach those truths which Sri Ramakrishna has, for the good of humanity, preached and demonstrated by practical application in his own life, and to help others to put these truths into practice in their lives for their temporal, mental, and spiritual advancement. The duty of the mission is to conduct in the right spirit the activities of the movement inaugurated by Sri Ramakrishna for the establishment of fellowship among the followers of different religions, knowing them all to be so many forms of only one undying eternal religion. Its methods and of action are A, to train people so as to make them competent to teach such knowledge or sciences as are conducive to the material and spiritual welfare of the masses. This is something the order is heavily criticized for because it's a spiritual institution, a spiritual organization founded upon a mystic who was a priest at a Kali temple. And yet they are very active in like famine relief, flood relief, like education initiatives. They do a lot of things that the Indian sannyasin might think are worldly, like engaging in like humanitarian works are sometimes considered by traditional sannyasins and sannyasinis to be worldly. So this is interesting that they're interested in promoting not just spiritual welfare, but importantly also material welfare. To promote and encourage arts and industries, and C, to introduce and spread among the people in general Vedantic and other religious ideas in the way in which they were elucidated in the life of Sri Ramakrishna. Indian Work Department. There's a whole separate section for what they're to do in India and a whole separate section for what they're to do in the West. Indian Work Department. The activities of the mission should be directed to the establishments of mutts and ashramas in different parts of India for the training of sannyasis and such of the householders as may be willing to devote their lives to educate others, and to the finding of the means by which they would be enabled to educate the people by going about from one province to another. Its work in the foreign department should be to send trained members of the order to countries outside India to start centers there for the preaching of Vedanta in order to bring about a closer relation and better understanding between India and foreign countries. The aims and ideals of the mission being purely spiritual and humanitarian, it shall have no connection with politics. That's a very important rule. So many of these institutions in India, eventually they become politicized and they start to align themselves with one party or the other. But it's particularly important that in the bylaws of the Ramakrishna Mission, they avoid any and all politics. Anyone who believes in the mission of Sri Ramakrishna or who sympathizes or is willing to cooperate with the above mentioned aims and objects of the association is eligible for membership. So then, they did the whole thing. Swami Brahmananda became the president, etc., etc. But you know what's interesting? When the meeting broke up and people like left, one of the Swamis, Swami said to Swami Yogananda, so the work has now begun in this way. Let us see how it succeeds by the will of Sri Ramakrishna. And then Swami Yogananda challenged him. He said, you are doing these things by Western methods. Would you say that Sri Ramakrishna left us any such instruction? It's an important thing that the direct disciples of Sri Ramakrishna were very individualistic and they were ready to call each other out on this kind of thing. So Swamiji's response, how do you know that these methods are not in keeping with his ideas? Sri Ramakrishna was the embodiment of infinite ideas. Do you want to shut him up in your own limits? I shall break those limits and scatter his ideas broadcast all over the world. He never instructed me to introduce worship of him and so forth. The methods of spiritual practice, concentration and meditation, and the other higher ideals of religion that he taught, those we must realize and teach to all people. Infinite are the ideas, and infinite are the paths that lead to the goal. I was not born to create a new sect in the world, too full of sects already. Blessed are we that we have found refuge at the feet of our Master. It is our duty to give the ideas entrusted to us freely to the whole world. So there are many beautiful moments here. Later, Swami Adbhutanandaji would also challenge him. You know, Latu Maharaj, he would also call him out on this and say, this is not really in keeping with Sri Ramakrishna's life of quiet renunciation and ecstatic devotion, like all this aggressive humanitarian work like that. And on every occasion, he would rise up and say, my job was not to start a religion. I'm not here to start a sect. In one place, he said, I'm not even a follower of Sri Ramakrishna. I'm a follower of that person who's willing to give their lives up for the good of others. So you feel like that Buddhist Mahakaruna, like flowing through Swamiji, and it's manifesting in this wonderful bhava of teaching freely to one and to all these spiritually nourishing ideas. Okay, so that's where all of this comes in. So that was the mission statement. That was the founding of the Ramakrishna Mutt and mission. We are, of course, many of us part of that lineage directly, insofar as we've received Diksha and taken initiation into that lineage. But we're also part of like a global movement that doesn't confine itself to any one sect or any one organization. And that movement is to make available to one and to all what was hitherto kept private to only a small group of people. And you'll see that in that mission statement, there was this idea of spreading the life-giving teachings of Vedanta and other religious ideals. So the Vedanta is very powerful, but so are the tantras. And during Swamiji's time, obviously it was impossible to talk about Kali. What to say of talking about the tantric tradition as a whole with all of its very transgressive and radical ideas. So now perhaps is the first time in history where there's not only a tremendous interest in tantra and a tremendous need for it, given the hunger for ritualism and feminine empowerment and the ideal of God as mother. Like there's a strong desire for it, but there's also power. There are also powerful tools that can meet that demand. So I'd like to talk a little bit about what we've been up to. We're going to look at a Bagalāmukhī Tantra right now. So the other day, so we've been working on these for quite some time. We've just had these. Anyway, in Bengal, there are a few tantric ritual manuals that are floating around. One of them is known as the Shakti Sangama. The other one is the Pranatoshini Tantra. Of course, Agama Vagisha Krishnanandaji's book, Tantra Sara, is very, very important. And the Shaktapramodah. These are all compilations, if you will. They're called digests. And in these texts, a series of different tantras are gathered and collected and published. So they're publicly available in Bengal, but they're all in Devanagari. Of course, many tantras are written in Devanagari, not necessarily just in Devanagari. Like in Kashmir, many of them are written in Sarada script. But whatever the case may be, whatever script might be the case, importantly, they're in Sanskrit. And not only are they in Sanskrit, they tend to be in very difficult, very obtuse, and very obscure Sanskrit because the teachings of the tantras themselves are coded in order to keep out the uninitiated. So not only are these texts hard to get, not only is Sanskrit literacy very hard to come by, but even if you acquired one of these texts, and even if you were fluent in Sanskrit, even then you probably wouldn't be able to understand what's contained therein because it's spoken in code. The word for this is Sandhya Bhasha, meaning twilight language. So a lot is said without being said. A lot is implied. And so it requires a guru, an actual living spiritual teacher. It requires access to a lineage to be able to decipher what these tantras say, which is, of course, a check and balance to ensure that these texts, which contain magical formulas that confer great power upon the practitioner, don't fall into the wrong hands. Because they could easily be abused or they could be misused and reactions can come about and all sorts of things. So it's better to have adult supervision, if you will. So the guru is required. And the guru is actually indispensable because, first of all, without the guru, in a traditional tantric context, you wouldn't have access to the shastra to begin with because a lot of this stuff was either in the guru's head or in her home. So she would keep it because she inherited it from her guru, for instance, or she would have it in her mind and so she'd be able to transmit it to you. So that's why the guru was very important. But more importantly, she had to kind of elucidate and illumine the text. So she had to tell you what the mantras really meant and how to do this and how to do that. Otherwise, it would be very difficult to make heads or tails of the Tantra. We wouldn't really know what to do or how to do it because the Tantra can be very sparse in its instruction. It presupposes that you already know a lot of stuff, or rather, it presupposes that there's someone next to you who can guide you through what the Tantra is saying. So there are those Bengali texts, yes, that we find in the Tantra Sara and whatnot. But then there are also other padatis from other parts of India. So in South India, of course, there are so many padatis, and many of them I was growing up with. I accessed them in Tamil, but of course, a lot of them are also there in Sanskrit. And then in Kashmir, as you know, there's Abhinavagupta's Tantraloka, which is primarily a padati, meaning it's primarily a ritual manual. It's got a lot of profound philosophical ideas. It presents a cosmology. It's an exegetical work in that it brings out the inner meanings of certain tantras, like the Tantra Sadbhava or like the Deva Yamala Tantra or the mainly the Malini Vijayotaro Tantra. It's commenting on tantras, but it itself is a kind of ritual manual because everything from chapters 14 to 37 tell you how to do rituals, how to initiate people, how to like do funerals, how to like all sorts of things, but mainly how to worship gods and goddesses according to the methods prescribed by different tantras. So the Tantra Loka itself can be considered a tantra, though it's technically a secondary source because it's not directly revealed by Shiva in the case of the other tantras. It is a primary source in that it merely presents and explains those things that were revealed by Shiva in the primary sources known as the tantras. So it's also in Sanskrit. It's in Sharada script at that. And so it's almost impossible actually to understand what's going on in the Tantra Loka unless we have a lot of scholarship, unless we've been marinating in the tradition for lifetimes, unless we have some competent teachers. So there are all these texts available, and that's where we get our tradition. But the problem is because these texts are accessible to only a few, a lot of superstition and myths and degenerate ideas about Tantra have emerged, which of course has polluted the stream of the teaching. And that means that people are they're desirous of Tantra. There's a need for Tantra, but perhaps we're also more confused than ever about what Tantra is and what exactly we should be doing. So, Heyopadeya Nishchaya, Abhinavagupta says, Diksha presupposes a steady conviction, a firm knowledge in what is to be held close and what is to be thrown away. Heyopadeya Nishchaya. Often we don't have that discernment. We don't know what's good for us and we don't know what we should avoid. And then we take Diksha and then we try to do tantric practices. That just won't do. But part of why that problem is the way that it is because there's not clear access to the primary sources. To have integrity, to have accountability, we must be able to go to the primary sources ourselves and see what Shiva himself said in those sources. And that's what we call Sadagama, like true teaching. And then Sadagama can be corroborated against Sadguru, what the teacher says, and that can be corroborated to Sattarka, reasoning based on one's own experience. When you have these three things, the correct scripture, the true authentic primary source, along with your own reasoning ability, guided and inspired by a living lineage and a living teacher, then you're practicing Tantra in a very safe and grounded way. So part of our mission and our work together, really Sri Ramakrishna's work and the work of the Ramakrishna Math mission, is to like make more of these texts accessible. So we've been doing a lot of translation work, but it's slow going. Chakreshwara knows. I sent him the Bagalāmukhī Tantra like way back when because we have these hard copies of tantras, and so I've been taking pictures of them. Some of them are on the internet. Sumeroji found the whole Shaktapramodah today on the internet. I haven't been myself that resourceful, but I have in this house many like physical copies of tantras, but they're all in Devanagari. Now, some of you grew up speaking Hindi, some of you studied Sanskrit in college. So those of you who are fluent in Sanskrit, who can read and understand, it's no problem. I've been sending you these padatis. Those of you who are interested in doing certain sadhanas, we can look over those padatis, and much of what we talk about here is from those padatis. But in an effort to like make it more accessible and to empower you to go to the primary sources, of course, we want to transliterate and translate all of these. So it's been painstaking. Like, some of you know I've been sending you dhyana mantras, like there's the Devanagari, and then we've been painstakingly using Sanskrit keyboards to transliterate it. And then we've been painstakingly trying to translate it word by word. Anand Bhai has been working really hard also, like just like, wait, this is this vibhakti and that's that vibhakti, and this agrees with that verb, and so this is the way to translate it, and here's an alternate meaning. So we've been doing that work together. Many of you know, because many of you have been involved in this translation project in real time. Anyway, something interesting and exciting happened the other day, right before a puja class, actually, a Thursday evening. Something occurred to me. Like, I was trying to translate a verse for our class, but I ran out of time. I only just got back from the middle school and I was like translating it, and I was like not quite happy with the translation. And I remembered something. What about the chat GPT? It's like it just occurred to me. I never thought of it before. So I plugged it into the chat GPT, just the Devanagari. I got a transliteration, and then I asked it to translate. And she like churned out in seconds a really beautiful translation with some mistakes though. So for instance, the phrase Dwada Shardhe, which is like a vocative form of like the number six. Ardha means half, Dwadasha means 12, so half of 12. It was translated as 12 and a half. So there are like these little discrepancies here and there. But if you like know Sanskrit and if you know the text, then those discrepancies can be easily edited out. And that's when I realized we could be working more quickly. So then Vijay and I have been trying to like take pictures of the primary sources that we have in the house and then put them into the chat GPT to see if we could get a transliteration and a translation that we could later then edit and organize in order to make these tantras more accessible. I'm talking about like Tara tantras and Matangi and Chinnamasta and Bagalāmukhī and swaths of the Tantra Loka, chapter 29, stuff like that. Like, can we make these very obscure, esoteric Sanskrit texts more available? Can we improve access to them? That's been the mission, the driving force. And so, Sumeruji came over and we're both big nerds. So we're just like talking, and we're discussing ChatGPT and whatnot. And Sumeru introduced me to some very dodgy looking sus website on the internet where you can put in pictures and then they will generate like text. Like the website looks at the picture and then converts all the Devanagari in print into like computer text, which was like huge. So then we can take that computer text and plug it into the chat GPT and then have it churn out transliterations and translations like that. So all night we've been Yogini Tantra, then today we were doing Chinnamasta Tantra, Matangi Tantra, Bagala Tantra, like just like it's kind of like a startup vibe here in the house. And we're just joking about how all the secrets of the universe are becoming so easily accessed through these technologies. Anyway, we had so much fun with it. Like I asked ChatGPT to come up with a dhyana mantra for herself in beautiful Sanskrit verse, and she did, and it was beautiful. And then she came up with her own yantra and her own vigraha. It was we had fun. We had a good time with it. But anyway, we've been working on these tantras and trying to put them together and edit them and whatnot. So I'm very excited to show you what we have just from this morning. I was working on a Bagalāmukhī Tantra, and Sumerji has been working at the Yogini Hridaya and the Dhyanams. Oh my God. The meditation mantras that we're uncovering in these texts. And partly because like we can work much faster now. So we're like covering much more of the literature and just like editing it and of course looking carefully at the Devanagari to make sure that what's there on the page in ink is there in writing and then to try to make sure that like what ChatGPT churns out as a transliterated and translated piece is in keeping with what's there in Devanagari. So like there's a lot of editing, but the work is so exciting because in editing we get to look very closely at the work and really just marinate our minds in the mantras. It's been remarkable and wonderful. And so I'm very excited to report this to you because I know that in the weeks to come, by the grace of ChatGPT, we'll be able to churn out more and more and more of these padatis, which I think will empower us all to learn in a more direct way. So because Bagalāmukhī is coming up, Bagalāmukhī Jayanti is coming up Sunday, I thought we should just like go over the Bagala sadhana, if you don't mind, and just look at some of the parts. I only got to do it up to a certain point. I have like 30 pages of the Padati, and I only got up to page 8. But already the bulk of the worship has already been offered. The rest of it is just hymns, stotrams, kavachams, shatnamas, sahasranamas, things like that. So the main gist of the tantra we managed this morning to get into transliteration and into translation. Of course, I need to do a lot of editing and I need to like maybe retranslate some sections and try to make sure that everything is authentic. But I just want to show you what I have so far, and I want to go over the Bagalāmukhī Tantra with you. Do you want to do that? Is that fun? Especially for Chakreshwara. This is something that Chakreshwara has been studying very closely for some time. So, who is Bagalāmukhī? For those of you who are maybe just joining us and who are new to the world of Shakta Tantra, she's one of the 10 fierce forms of the Divine Mother. And as you know, they are Kali, Tara, Shodashi, Bhuvaneshwari, Bhairavi, Chinnamastaka, Dhumavati, Bagala, Matangi, and Kamala. Though this is the general list that's quite popular, the list can change. Sometimes Durga is included in this list, and other deities are dropped, and sometimes their names might be different. Like Kamala might be Lakshmi, for instance, like that. So these are the forms of the Divine Mother. They're generally considered to be kind of transgressive. They're generally oriented towards like the Kaula and the Vamachar, not necessarily, but often. And so the worship of somebody like Bagala is very strongly associated to black magic practices, especially in Bengal and in other places. The worship of Matangi also is particularly associated to Kaula forms of Tantra, more transgressive practices, and the very founding myth of Tara Devi, and this is the Hindu Tara, which we talked about earlier in April. Do you remember we had a whole class on Ma Tara? Who is Ma Tara? In the Hindu Tantras, Ma Tara, like of course the Tibetan counterpart has a Saumya presentation, but here it's more of a Ghora form, more like a Vajra Vairochini or Varahi kind of figure. So she's worshipped very transgressively along the lines of the Kaula. So these are very closely guarded secrets. They're called Mahāvidya. Vidya means knowledge, but it also refers to mantra. Vidya is the feminine noun form of the word mantra. So these are vibrations, these are energies, and they're great energies in that they're fierce, intense, terrifying, um, and therefore kept quite secret. And so it's very hard to get access to them, although now they're more popular than at any other time before in history. I think it's still quite difficult to really learn anything about them and about their worship as prescribed by the various tantras. So Bagla is one of these 10, and we just had Matangi Jayanti a few days ago and Tara Jayanti just before that. Next up is going to be Bagla Jayanti and also Chinnamasta Jayanti. So my mission, Ma willing, is to have these padatis somewhat ready for you by the time the Jayanti comes around as an offering to that particular form of Ma. Now, the first thing I have to add here, though, before we get into the Tantra, is that we should never forget that these are all saris that the one same Divine Mother wears. So it's not like these are 10 different deities. It's not a polytheistic tradition. This is not a pantheon of deities. It's not the Justice League. It's not like this one has this superpower and that one has that superpower. It's the same Ma, okay? It's the same person who is your own essence nature. These are all representations of your own individual divinity. And each and every one of them is a different emphasis on that divinity. You know, like the statement, I love you could say, I love you. Or you could say, I love you. Or you could say, I love you. Or you could say, I love you. So these are all different ways of saying the same sentence. I think it's like that. All of these different ma's are different stresses, different stress points, different emphasis points of the same statement. And you know what that statement is? Tattvamasi, that thou art. You yourself are God. And these are all different ways to say it. So, of course, the worship of the Mahāvidyās, it leans closer towards the goddess transgressive non-dual part of Tantra. And so non-duality is highly stressed and emphasized in these traditions. So they can very rapidly confer non-dual knowledge. But they're also sought out because they can also confer power. So they have their roots, of course, in that yogini tradition that we talked about some time ago, the cults of power organized around the yoginis and the bhairavas of the cremation ground. So a lot of people approach the Mahāvidyās because they're seeking power. Not necessarily spiritual liberation or non-dual experience or to come closer to Ma in one of her aspects, but because they're trying to be empowered. And remember, that's not wrong. That's perfectly kosher and that's perfectly fine. It just doesn't happen to be our particular interest, but it's valid. It's part of the reason why many people are so interested in the Mahāvidyās these days. You know, because they're seeking empowerment through magical means and they're sensing the potential of Tantra to produce that kind of empowerment. It's still along the lines of Swamiji's mission, by the way, to bring more welfare on the level of the body, mind, and of course, spiritually speaking. And Sumeroji was just telling us about how in Kamakya, outside the Bagalāmukhī temple, there's like a long line of devotees. We're like, man, there are a lot of court cases, huh? People typically go to Bagala to win court cases, to stun their enemies, to get rid of people. Like, say you have neighbors you don't like, Bagalamukhi sadhana can get rid of them. Or it's a black magic type of sadhana where you can easily kill people, paralyze them, like stuff like that, magical things that might be attractive to certain people. And therefore, the sadhana is kept very secret so that it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. In fact, many of these sadhanas say it should never be taught except to people of peaceful dispositions because otherwise it could be easily weaponized, you know. Now, there's risk in doing what we're doing, obviously, and the Tantra knows that. And so even the Tantra itself carefully veils what it has to say so that it can control the dissemination of this knowledge. So what we're doing now is perhaps not really traditionally done, just publicly talking about these things. And these things are usually spoken about in a Diksha context, meaning between guru and disciple in initiatory context, and usually kept quite private and quite secret. Partly because there's an understanding that these practices can also have magical dimensions, and that could lead to maybe being ensnared by powerful sense attachments, or maybe it could lead to thickening one's karmic stew, if you will, if you do actions that are harmful to others. So, of course, the disclaimer must be made when we practice these sadhanas, all sorts of things can happen, but the main intention that we as a community have in practicing them is to experience Ma in the fullness of her being, to get closer and closer to that divine, which is even now my very own essence nature. Because we are devoted to the Divine Mother, we want to worship her and celebrate her for no other reason than to please her. So when we worship Ma Bagala, we're not interested in winning court cases or silencing our enemies. Instead, we're interested in Ma silencing the constant chatter in the mind, which projects a world of falsehood. We're asking Ma to catch our tongue and to cut our speech of illusion short. We're telling her to stun us, to club us on the head and paralyze us with her stunning beauty, to stun us into samadhi, if you will. So, like that, whenever we take up a mantra, and even if that mantra has a kind of magical dimension, we're always thinking, Buddhi Nashaya, it's my own mind that I want to obliterate before the glory of Ma. Jivham Kilaya, it's my own body that I want to make firm in yogic posture. Vacham, Mukham, Padam, it's my own speech, it's my own feet, it's my own coming and going that I want to seize in the stillness and ferocious beauty of Ma. Like that. So whenever we encounter any of these mantras, we're always spiritualizing them, thinking about them in the form of the highest ideal, which leads to the greatest empowerment for ourselves and for others. Being that the goal in this community has always been liberation, and more importantly, devotion. So that's our disclaimer. We're going to present all of these tantras, and you can do with them what you will. The Divine Mother alone is doing all of this. But we often say sincerity is the best way to approach these things. Just do it out of sincerity, out of love, and then let Ma guide you from there. Okay, so that's like a little bit of a disclaimer. Now, one more thing, in our tradition, Ma Bagala is particularly important because, like I've been saying in many occasions, last year we had a Bagalāmukhī talk. We talked specifically about her origins and about the various tantras and practices associated to her. But almost always I'll bring up this story. There was a guy, he used to come to see Sri Ramakrishna, very highly spiritually evolved, by the way. His name was Harish. And his wife didn't take too kindly to him coming to see Sri Ramakrishna. He would spend all week and all month with Sri Ramakrishna and kind of neglect his wife at home and whatnot. So one day his wife went to a black magician in a cremation ground and hired him to put a spell on her husband, Harish. So the whole thing is in the context of black magic. So the tantric put a spell on Harish and it caused Harish to go crazy. And so he went to see the Holy Mother. This is after Sri Ramakrishna had passed away. And he started chasing her around the room. Holy Mother was alone in the room and he came in and he was like deranged. He was under the influence of this magic. So he started chasing her around the room. Holy Mother, she's so demure, so sweet, so shy, so gentle. At first, she got up and started running. She's like, oh my God, this guy's chasing her around. And then something happened. There was a switch, as it were, flipped. And then suddenly she stopped, turned around, and she herself tells this story, by the way. She stopped, turned around, and caught this guy's tongue, like Qui-Gon Jinn in episode 1 of Phantom Menace, like catching Jar Jar Binks' tongue or something. Like, how do you even do that? But she caught this guy's tongue with her left hand, and then raised her right hand and bopped him on the head. Little rabbit foo-foo, I don't want to see you, scooping up the field mice and bopping them on the head. And then the interesting thing is the spell was broken. So she manifested this Bagalāmukhī form in order to save someone from black magic. She is the mistress of magic. From her, black magic comes, and into her it dissolves. She's the cure for all curses, as well as the source of all curses. Does this sound familiar? It's that hymn from the Chandi, Mahadevi Mahasuri. She's the great goddess and the great demoness. She's Maha Moha Chabhavati. She can be the great delusion, but she's also Maha Medha, Mahasmritihi, the great remembrance, the great knowledge. She's both Mahavidya and Mahamaya. So the Divine Mother plays all the roles, if you will. So you can't have hang-ups about the fact that she is being invoked by black magicians to do black magic. She'll do that for the plot, if you will. But also, those who worship Ma Bagala, those who worship Matangi, they're free from the tyranny of pure and impure. They're free from black magic. And the one who's really cursing us is not some tantric in the cremation ground who's being paid by some jealous family member. The one who's cursing us is our own mind, with all of its false words and its disempowering ideas. So to break that curse, we approach Ma Bagala. So this Sunday is going to be her Jayanti. Jai Ma Colleen. It's going to be her Jayanti, and it's going to be a very special day to connect with her. And I thought this Tantra might be like an offering at her lotus feet so that we'll have some means of connecting with her. Jai Ma. So let's get to it. Let me show you the Tantra now. This is what we have so far. This is the Bagalāmukhī Tantram. So this word here is Tantram. So this is the manual for the worship of Ma Bagala, and ChatGPT generated this cute little image here. Very sweet. So let's look first and foremost at the opening statement of the Tantra. Now, whenever we encounter religious scriptural texts in the Sanskrit genre, it almost always begins with something like Atta. Atta means and now. Atta Bagalāmukhī Tantram. Now, in the tradition of commenting upon the text, you can actually comment upon the word atta page after page after page. What does it mean to say and now? Arguably, the text can only be revealed to somebody who is sincere. So only having asked, how am I to worship Bagala, only then can this Tantra be removed. Only having received grace from Lord Shiva to study the Tantra, only then can it be revealed. Only by the grace of Shiva in the form of the Guru, only by the grace of your own mind can it be understood. Hence, atta. There's some prerequisite, so the word atta means you're ready, and by ready I mean you're sincere, you're yearning, you have vyakulata, you really want to know how to worship Ma in this form. Therefore, here it is, the manual for worshipping Ma Bagala. So the word atta is very charged. It's packed with a lot of symbolic meaning. It's a kind of, if you will, Anubandha Chatushtaya, tells you who can study this text. And then it tells you what this text is. And this text is primarily a response to the sincere yearning in our heart to approach Ma in the form of Bagala. The word Tantra literally just means ritual manual. So, Atta Bagalāmukhī Tantram. This is a ritual manual for the worship of the goddess Bagala. And it begins with the dhyanam, atta, and now Bagalāmukhī dhyanam, and now the meditation on Ma Bagalāmukhī. So the first thing the Tantra gives us is a means by which we can visualize her. Because until you can visualize her, it's very hard to establish a relationship to her. So here's what we get. Madhye sudhabdi mani mandapa ratna vedi singhasanopari gatam paripita varnam pitambara bharanamalya vibhushitangim devim namami drita mudrara vairi jivam jivagram adaya karena devim vamena shatrun paripirdayatim gadabhighatena cha dakshinena Pitambharadhyam dvibhujam namami. Madhye, in the middle of a Shudhabdi Mani Mandapa Ratnavedi, in the middle of a nectar-filled ocean, an ocean of nectar, on a pavilion made of wish-fulfilling gems, seated on a singhasanopari, upari, on top of a singhasan, a lion throne, atop a jeweled platform, Mani Mandapa Ratnavedi, whose complexion, Gatam, is pari, totally, pita, yellow, varnam, color. So in the midst of a nectar ocean pavilion made of wish-fulfilling gems, seated on a lion throne atop a jewel platform, whose complexion is entirely yellow, whose limbs are adorned with yellow garments, pitam bharabharana. Abharana means jewelry also, ornaments and garlands. So vibhushitangim, angim, anga means limbs, vibhushita means adorned, and she's adorned with yellow clothes and yellow ornaments, as well as a yellow mala. I worship the goddess, Devim Namami. I worship the goddess who, Drita Mudra Vairi Jivam, who holds a mace and grabs the enemy's jiva, tongue. The next verse says, I worship the two-armed goddess, Dvibhujam Namami. I worship the two-armed goddess who seizes the tip of the enemy's tongue with her left hand, tormenting them, while striking with the mace held in her right hand, resplendent in yellow garments. So these are the two verses, verse 1 and verse 2, translated as follows. So notice it's quite fierce. She's a fierce deity. She's a Ghora Rupa because she torments the enemies, she bashes them, but she's also very gentle because you can see that she's adorned with beautiful yellow garments. She's on this like lion asan, this throne, bejeweled throne in an ocean of nectar. In one version of her origin myth, she arises from an ocean of turmeric. She's one of the avatars of Vishnu, if you will, to restore balance to the force. She brings dharma where there is adharma. So she's good, she's deeply good, and she's gentle and beautiful. And at the same time, she's terrifying. She torments and bashes and stuns and is depicted in a very violent moment. So she's an aggressive deity, if you will. She's a Ghora Rupa, a fierce form. And then, Atha Yantro Dharaha. And now, the Udaraha, the extraction of the yantra. So the yantra is taught, it's not drawn, it's just said as follows. Triyastram Shad Asram Vritam Ashtadalam Padma Bhupuran Vitam. That's it. And that tells you that it's a triangle, a hexagon, and a circle, together forming a lotus of 8 petals, complete with the protective enclosure known as a bhupura. Thus is the form of the sacred diagram known as the yantra, or the mandala, which can be constructed and destroyed at each sitting. Or it could be like something embossed into a copper plate or a brass plate or a gold plate or something like that, and can be kept and worshipped continuously. In fact, the difference between a mandala and a yantra is that a mandala in this context is temporary. It's something you make out of colored powders, maybe, or something you draw onto a cloth, which you will later get rid of. You will immerse it into a river, Visarjan. Whereas a yantra is a geometric design. Basically, it's a mandala that is permanent and that can be used repeatedly with each sitting. So now that you have the dhyanam, which means the meditation mantra, the next thing is to think about the yantra, which is the deity's subtle geometric form. So here the yantra is reproduced. I just took a picture from the Shaktapramodah, and so this is the reproduction of the yantra from the Shaktapramodah. Jai Ma Patrick Ji. So here it is. This is the yantra, and it's an attempt to show the triangle, the hexagon, and the circle within the 8-petal lotus within the Bhupura. And this will be worshipped. So this yantra is important. It doesn't need to be drawn, it can be visualized, but it itself will provide a visual map for how to worship not only this goddess, but her mandala retinue, if you will. Because a goddess is rarely worshipped alone, she's often worshipped along with her emanations. So that's the yantra. So notice, this whole thing, the dhyana, talks about her vigraha, her stula rupa, which means her, I'm not going to say gross form, although that's what literally stula, the word means, but her tangible vaikari form, if you will, her more dualistic form, which is, I think, one of the most helpful forms of Ma, because it allows your mind something to really glom onto and develop a relationship to. But this is her sukshma rupa, her subtle form. The yantra is that same energy, but it's the pattern of energy in consciousness, if you will. So this is what Ma looks like on a slightly subtler, less dualistic level, less formal level. And then comes this. This is perhaps arguably the most important part of the Tantra, because this is what is given in Diksha. Now, this next moment is entirely in an academic context. So obviously this mantra will be empowered if received in a Diksha context, but here we'll encounter it in an academic context. It will still be powerful though, because the mantra is inherently powerful. Now, there are a lot of superstitions about this, like, oh, if I chant a mantra without Diksha, what will happen? Frankly, I don't know, because everything that we do out of sincerity, and so far, so good, I guess. Fingers crossed, touch wood. But many people say you should not chant mantras outside of Diksha. My general feeling about this is anything done out of sincerity is good. And more importantly, the mantra without Diksha will still have an effect. How much more powerful will it be then if you receive it in a Diksha context? So having not received it from a guru doesn't disqualify you from chanting it, especially if you're doing it out of devotion. So here comes the mantra udharaha. Atta mantro dharaha, the extraction of the mantra. So it tells us a few things. It tells us pranavam. Pranava means the Om. So we start with Om. And then you have something called the sthira mayam, which means the power of stillness. Sthira, maya. So the magic of stillness. This is a bija mantra. And we're supposed to understand from this, and this is the secret. This is why it requires a guru, because you wouldn't be able to understand just from reading it what this bija is. And we learn that this bija is Halim. Halim. This is the Sthira Maya Bija. So we start with the Om, then we have this Bija, Halim, and then we have the name Bagalāmukhī. So we start with Om, Halim, Bagalāmukhī. Tad ante, and after that, after that, Sarva Dushtanam. We say the word all the enemies. Sarva, all, Dushtanam, which means like wicked ones, I guess. Tato, and then Vacham, which means mouth or speech, I guess. Yeah, sorry, Vacham means speech, yeah. Mukham means face or mouth. Padam means feet. So you might see different versions of this. So in some tantrams, it's just Vacham, Mukham. But in most of them, it's Vacham, Mukham, Padam. So speech, face, and feet. Then we say Sthambayeti. And then comes the command, Stambhaya, which means immobilize or stun, followed by the word jivam, which means tongue, and kilaya means nail it down. So stun the enemy and nail down their tongue. Then buddhim nashaya, destroy the intellect. Buddhi means the discerning faculty. Nashaya means to destroy. Sometimes this appears as vinashaya. Vinashaya, as opposed to nashaya. So in this tantra, what we get is vacham, mukham, padam. But this phrase vacha mukham padam and this phrase nashaya, where is it, buddhim nashaya, you'll see variations on it, just to point that out, like from tantra to tantra. So anyway, here's what we got, and then it says should be like that, and then it says Then again, you say the Stiramaya, Halim, and then again you say Om, and then finally Swaha. This is the Shatrim Shadakshari Vidya. So remember, the word Vidya means mantra, yes? So this is the mantra, and it's a mantra of 36 syllables. So if anybody says the Satrim Shadakshari, you know it's this mantra. Or if somebody says the Maharagni, or the Shodakshari, or the Panchakshari, like that, or the you know the name of the mantra based on how many syllables it has. So tantrics speak to each other in this way. They'll say the mantra through a code. So this is the 36 syllabled vidya known as the bestower, Sarva Sampatkari Mata, the bestower of all prosperity. So this is very common in the world of tantra. They don't just give you a mantra, they give you a code that invites you to sort of unpack the mantra. Like we saw in the Karpuradi Stotram. You take ka, ra, and you add the vamakshi, which you know from your ritual practice is I. And then you add the bindu. So you know how to get ka, ra, I, and ang through that code, if you will. So tantras don't just tell you the mantra, they give you a code and wait for your guru to help you unpack it so that you can receive the mantra. Because it's said, right? It's said in the tantras that if you write down a mantra, it loses its power. So a mantra must be given verbally. So there's a kind of superstition around writing mantras down. It's kind of a no-no. One should not write a mantra down. So in these tantras, they're alluded to, they're implied, they are never directly given. Then when you sit with the guru and the guru explains the tantra, then the guru whispers into your left ear the mantra, which is the first time you hear it. That being said, though, there is a case for seeing it because the rishis of old, they're hearers. They heard the mantras, but in a sense, they also saw the mantras in blazing letters appearing before them. So the rishis are seers because there's a visual component to the mantra. So just like looking at a yantra can powerfully empower you, like we were just talking today, that if you just look at a yantra, you can be initiated in a sense by the yantra. It's no small thing to look at a yantra, to encounter the goddess in any representation visually. Every single day, I kid you not, every single day I get a flood of messages across various social media platforms, and many of them are people telling me that they had a strong experience looking at a picture of Kali, looking at a yantra of Kali, hearing Kali's mantra, like they go to a festival maybe, and then at the festival some DJ plays Ma Kali's mantra and they have an experience, and now they have this insatiable desire to approach her. So looking at a yantra, hearing a mantra, these can all be very powerful moments in one sadhana. You could be like high for days just encountering the energy that flows from a yantra, from a mantra. So hearing it for the first time is powerful. Seeing it for the first time is also powerful. So although there are superstitions around like writing the mantra down, usually in like the post 1800s, like 1900s type padatis that, get published in Bengal and in other places, the mantra is written. So this is what's called the Mula mantra. And so it says Atta mantraha. Here is the mantra, the Mula mantra or the core mantra. And here it is. Although I notice this is a mistake, right? It should be Halim over here. So that would be like something. So this didn't really get translated too well. It's a Hring over here. But that would be fine also, actually. That's just that mantra is a different name. But anyway, that being said, whether Halim or Hring, here's the mantra. Om Halim Bagalāmukhī Sarvadushtānām Vācham Mukham Stambhaya Jivam Kilaya Buddhim Nashaya Hling Om Swaha. Now you might notice here is a discrepancy because Vacham Mukham Stambhaya. The mantra that was given by this tantra is Vacham Mukham Stambhaya, whereas in this it says Vacham Mukham Padam. What to make of that? That's an interesting thing. So we often say the first way you heard it is the way that you should chant it. So don't be like confused if you encounter variations. However, the guru said the mantra in the time of Diksha, that's the way Ma wanted you to chant it. That's what we just say. But also we say, don't fuss about it too much. Yes, there is something to the syllables. It's 36 syllables. But the most important thing is that you enter into the energy of the mantra just through its sincere repetition. Of course, there's a great emphasis on trying to get the mantra right, but there's also a great emphasis on Guru Yoga. And the right mantra is the one that you chant in faith and sincerity based on whatever it is that the Guru told us. Now here, the text, the tantra itself says Vacha Mukham Stambhaya, not Vacha Mukham Padam Stambhaya. And then it says Buddhim Nashaya, not Buddhim Vinashaya. So that being said, just account for all these variations and choose one, or rather chant the one that comes naturally to you. Maybe in a previous life you were initiated into it, or you might have a particular preference for one way of chanting it, or your guru might have given you the mantra in a particular way. Now, this is the mantra that you can do japa with. That is, you can do repetitions of this mantra, and then later you'll see a kind of purasharana practice is prescribed using this mantra. So, of the various elements in the tantra, you now have a kind of physical form to visualize Ma in, a geometrical form to interact with her, and a mantric form. And the mantra is so profound. Just the other day, Sumeru was showing me in the Yogini Tantra how like each part of the mantra describes a part of Mother. Like it's like you can visualize the Divine Mother in the vowels, in the syllables of the mantra. It's profound. Anyway, so this is a powerful mantra. And you can find it on the internet. That's the thing. So it's like publicly available. Obviously, the mantra, it's not a secret anymore. But notice this is how initially it would have been presented, as a secret. And then this is like the decoded, if you will. So here's the translation: Om Halim, O Bagalāmukhī, immobilize the speech and mouths of all wicked beings. And if you had padam, then and feet. So immobilize the speech and mouths and feet of all wicked beings. Nail down their tongues. Nail them down, because it's twice. Jivam, kilaya, kilaya. How emphatic. Nail their tongue. Nail their tongue. Buddhim, nashaya. Destroy their intellects. Halim, om, swaha. So as you can see, it's an aggressive form of Ma, and it's a pretty aggressive mantra. But remember, we're reading it in its most spiritual light, not to discount the other readings that can be had. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So you have everything that you need already, actually, to have a direct, immediate experience of Ma. You can visualize her through the dhyana, you can visualize her yantra, and you can chant her mantra, and you can do all three at the same time. And that is already unto itself a sadhana. It's already a spiritual practice for connecting to the Divine Mother. That being said, though, there's more. There's a worship that we can do, and this is called a puja. Puja means adoration or worship, and that's what this class is all about. We're learning puja. In other words, we're learning ritual procedures. The word vidhi means rules or injunctions or procedures. So this whole thing can be called a vidhi, meaning a recipe for connecting to God in this particular form. So let's see what the vidhi says. I'm just going to skip to the English translation. Prata. Pratar smarami hridi samspuradatma tattvam. Pratar means dawn. So prata, in the morning, having completed preliminary acts. And so this is the word just krityadi, which just means acts, and the regulation of breath, pranayama. One should perform the rishi nyasa, the ritual assignment of seers, meters, etc. as follows. So what's this? Notice, the tantra presupposes that you've already learned all the stuff that we learned together in the last 3 years. How to do achamanam, how to like wipe your lips, like how to purify the altar and the space and the flowers, how to do bhuta shuddhi and nyasas, like all of that stuff that you've learned. It's all just mentioned in this one line. And we have to know about pranayama, like all these things are presupposed of us. So that's why if you were to pick up this tantra, we wouldn't really know where to begin, actually, because it presupposes a lot of stuff. So now we know. We've studied together for many years the preliminary acts, achamanam, and then the sankalpa, and then establishing the saman arghya jhalam, the water that will be used, and then the dwara devata puja, worshipping the gods and goddesses of the door. We learned about the asana, the establishing of the seat, the dispelling of ghosts. We learned about all these various preliminaries. We learned about the purification of celestial obstacles, earthly obstacles, underworldly obstacles, the conjuring up of a wheel of fire, a circle of fire to protect the space, the purification of the Sanskrit alphabets. Like we learned so many ritual procedures that are all implied by this line, preliminary acts. So that's like 30 minutes, 45 minutes, maybe even an hour of puja already performed. This comes after that. So hopefully you can see why this is a good time to talk about these things, because we've already covered the preliminaries, and now we can start talking about the worship proper, the worship of these deities. So now the Rishi Nyasa. So this is called a Vishesha Nyasa. You've already done many Nyasas probably before this moment. The Vishesha Nyasa means a special invocation. So you say Narada Rishaye Namaha, Trishtup Chandase Namaha, Bagalāmukhī Namaha, Hring Vijaya Namaha, Hung. Oh, sorry. Hring Vijaya Namaha, Swaha Shaktaye Namaha. So you know this. We've learned this already. Om Brahmane Rishaya Namaha, Om Gayatri Chandase Namaha, Om Saraswate Devataye Namaha, Om Halbhyo Bijabhyo Namaha, Om Swarabhyo Shakbhyo Namaha, Om Avyakta Kilakaya Namaha. Like that whole Risha segment we learned earlier. So this is a specific one. Narada, the sage, composed this in the meter called Trishtup, which is funnily 11 beats per verse, 44 beats over the line, which is what Tantra Loka verse 1 is in. Paramarthasara and Tantra Loka verse 1 are both in Trishtup. Bagala, of course, is the deity. So Narada composed this meter, composed this in Trishtub to the goddess Bagala. The bija is Hring, but I think that's a mistake. It's Hling. And the power is Swaha. So this is the translation. The C of this mantra is Narada. Its meter is Trishtub. By the way, the tantra, it does actually say you should put this in the murdani, in the crown of the head, and then this is in the face, and then this is in the heart, hridaye, like that. So you start with the crown of the head, and you say Narada Rishaye Namaha or Om Narada Rishaye Namaha, and then on the mouth Om Trishtub Chandase Namaha, then in the heart, Om Bagalāmukhī Devye Namaha, and then in the Guya Desha, which could mean perineum, or sometimes it could mean the genitals, you could say Haling, um, Devye, Hling, Bijebhyo Namaha, Hling Bijaya Namaha, sorry, yeah, Hling Bijaya Namaha, and then you can touch the 2 feet and you could say Swaha Shaktaye Namaha, or you could just say Naradaye Namaha, Trishtub Namaha, or sorry, Narada Chandas. How do I do it? Because I'm doing it the way that the Padathi did it, but here you could just say maybe Narada, Trishtub, Bagalāmukhī, Haling, Swaha. You could just touch these places and say these words. But usually, it's implied that you would render this into the vocative form and into a kind of salutation. So you would make it into a mantra. So I'll try to write them down by the side of this so that you can see what the mantras would be. But you've already learned them. Just remember, you're just using different names for the forms that you learned earlier. So it'd be Om Narada Rishaye Namaha, Om Trishtub Chandase Namaha, Om Bagalāmukhī Devye Namaha, Om Hling Bijaya Namaha, Om Swaha Shaktaye Namaha, like that, just moving that energy down. And then you do the hand limb nyasa. So Om Hling Angushtabhyam Namaha, Bagalāmukhī Tajanibhyam Swaha, Sarvadushtana Madhyamabhyam Vashat, Vachamukham Stambhaya, Anamikabhyam Hung, Jivam Kilaya Kilaya Kanishtabhyam Bhaushat, Buddhim Nashaya Hlim Om Swaha, Karadalapristabhyam Astraya Pat, or Karadalapristabhyam Pat. You already know that. See, if you didn't know that, it would be kind of confusing what's being presented here. But you learned that technique of touching the different fingers and installing. Notice what you're installing here is just the mantra. Om Halim Bagalāmukhī Sarvadushtanam Vacham Mukham Stambhaya Jivam Kilaya Kilaya Buddhim Nashaya Halim Om Swaha. One problem with the chat GPT is sometimes Halim is rendered into Hring, stuff like that. So I'm going to go in and edit this a little bit. But notice, again, it's Vacham Mukham. So a corroboration. It's not Vacha Mukham Padam Stambhaya, it's Vacha Mukham Stambhaya, you see. So throughout the whole Tantra, it seems to stick to that mantra, Vacha Mukham Stambhaya. Anyway, so in this, what do you call it? Nyasa, you're doing a kara nyasa, a hand nyasa. And so those of you who've been following along with the puja class, there's a class called consecration of the hands, I think, and it's the section called kara nyasa. So if you go to the Kali Puja, here's the Kali Puja. We've just been doing the Uchishta Chandalini Puja. So if you go up here, if you go here, look at that Karanyasa, and you click into Karanyasa, and you click that. Here it is. Angushtabhyam nama tarjanibhyam swa madhyamabhyam vashat anamikabhyam hung kanishtabhyam vashat karadalabhustabhyam astraya. But this whole segment that we learned, we're now applying it in this context. Om hling angushtabhyam namaha Bagalāmukhī tarjanibhyam swaha sarvadushtana madhyamabhyam vashat vachamukham stambhaya anamikabhyam hung jivam kilaya kilaya kanishtabhyam vashat buddhim nashaya hlim ong swaha karadala karaprastabhyam astraya pat Karatala kara prashtabhyam astraya pat, or just pat. And then it says evam, and also do it to the heart. So then you would do Om Hling Hridayaya Namaha, Om Bagalāmukhī Shirase Swaha, Sarvadushtanam Shikaye Vashat, Vachamukham Stambhaya, Kavachaya Hung, Jivam Kilaya Kilaya Netratraya Vaushatta Buddhim Nashaya Hlimong Swaha, Karatala Karaprastabhyam Astraya pat, or just but so you know that segment. Now here's how you apply it, right? So in that sense, and here's it just tells us what this meant. And evam hridayadishu hridaya adi. So likewise, apply this method to the heart and the other limbs for a full nyasa. So this is called vishesha nyasa, okay? Special nyasa for the deity. I'm just going to skip this for now. And then there's this beautiful worship called the worship of the divine sandal. So let's look at this. Then at the base, mulanta, at the end of the base, which is probably your own perineum. or just visualizing the Divine Mother in your mind. Worship the divine sandals, Shri Paduka of Bagalāmukhī, as she who pervades the principles of the self, Atma Tattva, in the Muladhara, as the one who pervades the principle of Vidya, Vidya Tattva, at the crown of the head, Shirasa, and the one who pervades the principle of Shiva, Shiva Tattva, across the entire body. Does this sound familiar? Om Atmatvaya Shodayami Swaha, Om Hring Vidvaya Shodayami Swaham, Kling Shivadvaya Shodayami Swaha, like that. So this could just be an achamanam, or you could say Om Atma Tatvaya Swaha, Om Vidya Tatvaya Swaha, Om Shiva Tatvaya Swaha. And as you worship these three things, you visualize yourself in the base, in the crown, and across your whole body. Like that. Or you can, in your mind's eye, visualize Bagalāmukhī sandals and you can worship them. Now you're offering yourself at the feet of the Divine Mother, as it were. The tantras always have this tatascha, and then tata, and then. So thereafter perform nyasa upon the crown, the forehead, the ears, the eyes, the cheeks, the nostrils, the lips. Now you know how to do this. Ang nama, ing nama, ong nama, ring nama, ling nama, eng nama, aing nama, ong nama, ang nama, aha, kang nama, gang nama, chang nama, chang nama, chang nama, chang nama. You learn that whole thing. So this section already should not be new to you. This whole section down here, all the 27 parts of the body, it says one should systematically place the mantra syllables across all of these sites and meditate as prescribed. So I counted it to 27 just to see whether it was like the 36 map onto the parts of the body, but no, it's the regular nyasa where you ang, ing, ung, like that. And then the meditation again. But there's a variation. So here, instead of saying namami in the first verse, it says smarami. There's a slight variation in the meditation that might be important to you. I just wanted to point it out. And so you meditate on her again. Then having meditated on her a second time, now you perform the mental worship, manasa, mental worship. So having meditated upon her, perform the mental worship, and then it's time to worship her externally. One should then begin the external worship, which is called bahi pujam. Actually, this should go up here. Sorry. That should go over here. Yeah. Okay, so now comes the external worship. So you start, interestingly enough, with the worship of Ganesh. Like we said, we usually begin with Ganesh. So first comes the establishment, sthapanam, of Arya, which is a name for Ganesha. So here we're told to construct a square of 8 finger widths. Angulam. Angulam is a particular measurement in Shilpa or Vastu Shastra. So 8 square finger widths, we make a square, like the yantra. And in the corners, beginning with the southeast and proceeding clockwise, offer flowers, grains, red sandalwood, etc. So if there are 4 corners, so you start with the southeast and you go chicka, 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 4 corners. There's also something in the center. Notice how many items do we offer? 5. Panchopachara puja. So beginning in the southeast, just do your sequence of Panchopachara as you learned from the previous puja classes. So fragrance, and then flowers, and then incense, and then fire, and then finally some food in the middle maybe. So this is the worship of the Ganesh yantra, which is really just a square. And while you're doing it, it tells you to utter a mantra, and it gives us a mantra. The bija is glong. The name is Ganapataye and the salutation Namaha. So thus worship the elephant-faced one and then install his limbs. Glong Ganapataye Namaha. Now in our Puja Parithi, we'll learn it later, we'll learn the installation of Ganesh. So it seems like here the worship precedes the installation of Ganesh. One can install Ganesh into one's own limbs, or one can install Ganesh into the limbs of a murti. It's likely the former, not the latter, because here Ganesh is established as a square. So he's being worshipped as the Muladhara Chakra, as it were. So you can think of this as the worship of the Muladhara Chakra. Then Dhenu Yoni Mudra, forming a mudra. We'll go over that in the next class. You can just Google it. Dhenu Yoni Mudra or Dhenu Mudra and Yoni Mudra. So you can do them both in succession. So show the Dhenu Mudra and then show the Yoni Mudra. So showing a mudra is a very important part of the worship. And then you're worshipping Shakti, the Adhara Shakti, Malasanaya Namaha. Shakti Padmasanaya Namaha, you're worshipping the Shaktis that uphold the deity. So this is like a Pita Devata or Pita Shakti Puja. And having done the Pita Devata, Pita Shakti Puja, invoke the goddess into the seat and place the sixfold limbs, which we'll talk about in another class. And then having shown the mudra, now you worship the mandala in front of them using the 6 limbs. So there's this Mula mantra, there's a mudra, and then there's a achamanam, And then with this Tarjani Angushta Yoga, with the union of the index finger and thumb, one should offer oblations to Bagalamukhi, complete with her limbs and coverings, but this should, I think, translate to attendant deities. Anyway, this stuff is getting pretty technical, and I've very much run out of time. I'm actually 30 minutes late to my next class, so I'm rushing a bit too much. I think I should save this for a future class, but I'm just going to make this document available to one and to all as an offering to Sri Ramakrishna Paramahansadev and as an offering to Belur Math, who today was established for the good of all beings everywhere, to make what was known to a few accessible to many, to make the resources that were benefiting only a small group of elite spiritual practitioners available to one and to all. May all sincere people come to the mother using whatever tools the mother herself has provided. So here it is, the Bagalāmukhī Tantra. Let me show you one more thing. At the end, there's a hymn of praise, Atta Stotram. It's about 16 verses, and it's so beautiful. There's a nyasa, then there's a meditation mantra again, and it starts with like verse 3 is when the hymn starts. So I just put the straight Devanagari here, and then the translations are all here. So you can chant it with the Devanagari, you can chant it with the transliteration. And here, it's so beautiful. I remember Smarami, I remember that Bagalamukhi who strikes down adversaries with her mace, whose gently quivering tongue tip trembles as she restrains her foes, who paralyzes the speech and minds of the hostile and rebellious. In the beautiful pavilion of red lotuses, floating in the ocean of nectar, she sits upon a lion throne and the skulls of vanquished foes, seated on a corpse seat, radiant like gold, grasping the enemy's tongue in her hand and whirling her mace. Whoever meditates thus upon her, all their afflictions dissolve instantly. O goddess, that adept, who with devotion offers yellow flowers at your lotus feet, placing them in the left hand with reverence, who recites your mantra composed of graceful syllables, who meditates on the seat and holds his breath while focusing on the seed syllable. For such a one, the voice and mind of the enemy become dull and stupefied in that very instant. The speaker is rendered mute, the beggar is uplifted, the fiery king turns cool, the angry one calms down, the wicked one becomes noble, the ungraspable swiftly becomes obedient, and the proud are humbled. Even the most learned become dull when bound by your enchantment. O eternal Shri Bagalamukhi, auspicious one, I bow to you each day. Your mantra alone is sufficient to destroy the enemy. Your stotram is sacred. Your yantra is a powerful restraint upon the speaker. It triumphs in all the three worlds and is wondrous. O Shri Bagalā Ma, if any creature speaks your sweet name, the mouths of disputants fall silent in assembly. Your form is the paralyzer of the wicked, the destroyer of fierce obstacles, the dispenser of poverty, the pacifier of tyrants, the attractor of the minds of restless, deer-eyed one, Mrigakshane. You are the ocean. You are the sole abode of fortune, an ocean of nectar filled with compassion for all beings. O Mother, may your divine form appear before me as death's own death and the giver of immortality. O Mother, shatter the mouths of my adversaries, nail down their tongue, seal them with Brahmi's mudra, destroy their intellects at once, immobilize their terrible movements, crush the enemies, O Goddess, with your sharp mace. O fair-limbed, yellow-clad one, O Bagalā with eyes full of compassion, remove the multitude of obstacles for your devoted one. O Mother, and here's the non-dual teaching, Bhairavi, Bhadrakali, and here Vijaya, Varahi, Vishvashraye, the refuge of the universe, Shri Vidya, Samaya, Maheshi, Bagalā, Kameshi, Rama's beloved Sita, Matangi, Tripure. You are beyond the beyond, O giver of heaven and liberation. I am your servant, surrendered at your feet, O universal sovereign, Vishveshwari. Trahimam, Trahimam, Trahimam. Save me through your karuna, compassion. In moments of danger, in encounters with thieves or attackers, in bondage, in the midst of water, during debates on sacred knowledge or disputes, before an enraged king, in twilight hours or during the night, whether for enchantment, immobilization, or slaying of enemies, in solitude or wilderness, whoever steadfast recites this at all the three times of day shall quickly attain auspiciousness and well-being. This is a falashruti, what you get from chanting. Whoever recites this sacred hymn daily with reverence to the goddess while bearing her yantra on the arm, hand, or neck, so having a yantra on you is prescribed by the Tantra. So, even wrathful kings, arrogant enemies, venomous serpents, and mighty beasts all become deluded and subdued. The enemy host is vanquished, fortune becomes stable, and powers, siddhis, are attained. You are the supreme knowledge, the mother of the three worlds, the severer of all obstacles. You attract even the most enchanting women. You nourish the bliss of the three realms. You expel the wicked, bestow delusion upon the hearts of beings. You are the Bhairavi who nails down the tongue, victorious as the mantras of Brahma and the gods. Through you, O Vidya, are obtained wealth, Lakshmi, all good fortune, longevity, sons and grandsons, and the fulfillment of imperial sovereignty, honor, enjoyment, command over others, health, and happiness. All these are attained on this very earth by the one who invokes you. This invocation, this recitation of sacred syllables, O Supreme Goddess, has been performed for the subjugation of the wicked. Please accept it, obeisance unto you. Namostute, Namostute. This is known as the Brahmastra, the ultimate divine weapon, celebrated in all the three worlds. It should only be given to a disciple who is devoted to the Guru, never to just anyone. So that's an important thing. What we're doing seems to violate the injunction of Shiva himself. He said, it should only be given to a disciple who is devoted to the Guru, never to just anyone. But this isn't anyone. I'm speaking to God herself, embodied as Kuleshwari, as Colleen, as Chakreshwara, as Nikhila. We don't believe in anyone. These people that are before us now, Aaron, Asha, Scott, Jessica, Carl G, they're not people. They're all manifestations of the one divine reality. So I'm speaking this to the mother herself. Not to anyone, not to just anyone, but to the Divine Mother Kali, appearing in the form of a Carl or a Scott or whatnot. One should meditate upon Bagalāmukhī, clad in yellow, two-armed, triple-eyed, whose body blazes with splendor, and who holds a stone mallet, Shila Mudgara, in her hand. Thus ends the Bagalāmukhī Sutram from the Rudra Yamala Tantra. So it tells us where this is from, the Rudra Yamala Tantra, which is actually lost. We don't have that whole Tantra. So I just wanted to share this with you. It's a work in progress. There's so much more to do. There's like a Kavacham. There's like, oh my God, there's like so many more pages left to uncover. And so I just wanted to share with you what's going on and to make this Tantra available to those of you who want to worship Ma Bagala this weekend on her Jayanti out of the pure, sincere devotion of wanting to experience Ma. So let me just copy the link. And I'm going to put it here in the chat. Ta-da! Jai Ma. May this be an offering at the lotus feet of Bagalāmukhī. If we have made any mistake, please forgive us, Ma. Vidhi hinam kriya hinam mantra hinam yadarchitam. Maya niveditam bhaktya paripurnam tadastume. We don't know the proper rules. We don't know the proper procedures. We don't know how to pronounce the mantras correctly. And we certainly don't even know the proper mantras. But being offered with devotion, please accept this and please be gracious. If we have committed any transgression, it has only been through devotion. If we have profaned thy sacred name, if we have made public that which was meant to be secret, forgive us this transgression. May I go to hell innumerable times, if only to spread the one thing I love, your form to all those whom I love, who is your very form embodied. Forgive us this transgression. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Tat Sat. Shri Ram Krishna Arpanam Astu. May it all be done in the name of Shri Ram Krishna. Om. Peace, peace, peace.